What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast. A lot going on today. Cousins, trade rumors, Dak Prescott getting crushed by former NFL players. Belichick plays his old mentee, Josh McDaniels. That's a big game, as well as some other thoughts around the National Football League. But first, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you may listen. Apple, Spotify, you guys know the drill. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the page. Leave a comment below in the description. Hammer that like button. As you can see, I'm rocking a little 3 and Out hat. Go to thevolume.com and search some merch, thevolume.com. We got 3 and Out gear. I'm wearing a little flex fit right now. Before we dive into some football, can I tell you about my friends, my partners, and a company that I swear by, Gametime. Grab your smartphone right now and go to your app store. Download the Gametime app, the official ticketing app of this show. Gametime, the official ticketing app of this show. And do yourself a favor. Do you want to go to a football game? I'm watching the World Series right now. Or not the World Series, but the Major League Baseball playoffs. Do you live in Texas? Do you want to go to watch my guy Bruce Bochy make another World Series run? Go to Gametime. Look at any event you want to go to. You can search based on the venue and the price point. Use the promo code John. Promo code John, $20 off your first pair of tickets. Concerts, comedy shows, they have you covered. Promo code John. Cannot recommend them enough. Gametime, fastest growing ticketing app in America. Promo code John. You know, it's weird. In football, when you become really good, we just kind of nitpick you for championships, right? Like Lamar, Josh Allen, Herbert's going to become this, Trevor Lawrence too. Until they win a championship, we'll nitpick you at the highest level, but everyone acknowledges how sweet these guys are. I mean, specifically Josh Allen, Lamar, and Herbert. We can debate Trevor Lawrence, but he has games like he just did in London. He'll shut everyone up. Once you become Mahomes, Peyton, Brady, Breeze, Rodgers, their trump cards always, I'm a champion. Then there's this group of guys that are never going to win a Super Bowl, and we debate how good they are, right? We know, we all acknowledge they're never winning it. But we also acknowledge, like, they're way better than the majority of guys. But they're not the group that I just listed. Like, they're never going to be Mahomes. They're never going to be Josh Allen. They're never going to be what Aaron Rodgers was. Like, never. Not even close. But they're damn good. The problem is with Kirk Cousins, who today, and rightfully so, was asked if he'd waive his no-trade clause to be traded, and Dak Prescott, who are both kind of in the same world. Like, if your team's built well, you can win a lot of games, but you're going to have games throughout the year where it's going to be like, what the hell was that? But overall, the stats are going to look good, and you're going to go to the playoffs and maybe win a game. Cousins a couple years ago beat New Orleans on the road. Dak last year hammered the Bucs, and then you'll lose, and we'll say bye-bye. The problem is, and I was really thinking about this today, because my take has always been like, what's Jerry supposed to do? Just like let Dak walk? The Minnesota, are they being kind of crazy for basically acknowledging, one, that they would trade him, but two, that they have no intention on resigning him? I think once you get to a point with these guys, and Cousins is older than Dak, but when I just know there is no chance we're making a Super Bowl run with this guy, but I have to pay you $40 to $45 million, it no longer makes financial sense. I've saw two guys, when I worked with the Eagles, as a staff member, you ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the facility. The players would basically just eat breakfast and lunch. But some of the guys, they would be there around dinner time, and they would have dinner. So you'd hold court with, Shady McCoy was always there, Brent Selleck, and it was fun. Like, you'd be bullshitting about football, making fun of guys, and you'd get to know their personality. So when you see some of these viral clips of Shady now, like, Shady's fun. And I'll give him credit. He is not afraid to say, like, I always thought it was very disingenuous when the Zach Wilson scenario or situation a couple weeks ago, when Rodney Harrison called him garbage, and then everyone pushed back like that's unfair. Every human being was calling the guy garbage. Maybe we were using a different word to describe him, but we all acknowledged the guy really sucked. So when Rodney Harrison one of the better players of his generation, is saying this, you all were saying it too. And I know I'm not talking about you, the listener. I'm just saying anyone that pushed back, right? Shady McCoy has been on this early. He doesn't believe in Dak Prescott. And I think a lot of people thought, well, he's an Eagle, hates the Cowboys, which is true, right? What's weird is, and I wouldn't have known the NFC East like I do if I hadn't lived it. I'm a West Coast guy, but the NFC East basically has a couple true rivalries. The Giants hate the Eagles and the Cowboys. The Eagles hate the Giants and the Cowboys, and the Cowboys hate the Giants and the Eagles. And Washington, at least under Dan Snyder the last couple of decades, is kind of irrelevant. And as you see this year, not that they're terrible. I mean, last year they beat the Eagles. They have some upset wins. A couple times over the couple decades, they've made the playoffs. But it feels, because they've become so crappy, that they're out of the mix. So when all these people, especially Cowboy fans, see Shady McCoy calling him ass, they think it's like personal. And he just thinks he's not any good. And then in my neck of the woods, Dante Whitner, who does 49er postgame on like local TV, said basically, they came to him, he's like, Dak Prescott sucks. And he took a lot of shit for saying that. Like, let's face it, Dak Prescott, I don't think necessarily sucks, but he's not good enough at the highest level to win, right? And same thing with Cousins, who I actually think is better currently than Dak Prescott. But the complicated situation with those two guys is, how can you pay them? No, this isn't, you don't take less money when you're throwing for 35 plus touchdowns. You make more. That's the way the NFL works at quarterback. So both these guys are in line for raises. And I've kind of come around with Minnesota. Like, how am I going to give this guy $43, $44 million a year? I can't do it, because I can't build my team around that. Now, Jerry is adamant that they're going to pay Dak. But when you look at the puzzle pieces, like, how do I build a team if his next contract is $45 million a year? We all know he's not a $45 million a year quarterback. We can nitpick Jalen Hurts. Like, was it too early to give him? Jalen Hurts is a better player than Dak Prescott. Period, point blank, end of story. That's not even debatable. And we've seen him play. Hell, we just saw Brock Purdy be dramatically better. And here's the thing with Dak Prescott. It's not like he's playing with nobodies. So I think these guys' contract situations, I've kind of pivoted, because I thought, like, how are you going to upgrade? Maybe it's not even about upgrading. Maybe it's just about, can we get 90% of the player as a second-round draft pick within a couple years? But the difference is, financially, he's making 1/40th. If that guy's making $1 million and Dak's making 45, think of the advantage we have building our team. And I think Minnesota looks at the same. Now, it is hard. Even if you take the guy in the second round, the likelihood that that guy is a good starting quarterback is very hit or miss. Most guys don't become, in the second round, Jimmy Garoppolo or Derek Carr. Hell, most guys in the first round don't become legit starting quarterback. So it's a complicated situation. But I think Cousins with Minnesota is strictly financial. Of course, they know he's good. Hell, I mean, and they know it's going to be difficult to upgrade. But it's all about money. They can't build their team. Now, we'll see how this thing plays out with, I mean, next week's big. Monday Night Football, Dak Prescott against Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert makes a shitload of money. There is not a soul in the NFL, not one GM, not one coach, not one quarterback coach, not one assistant GM that would take Dak Prescott over Justin Herbert. And they're in somewhat of the same world when it comes to money. So Dak's going to need to step up. And last week he said he was shell-shocked with the 49er game, and he thought they had an excellent plan. Like, all that stuff's great. It's like when coaches are like, God, this guy was great in practice. Yeah, he sucked in the game. No one gives a shit what the guy knows in practice. You get paid for the games. And I think the other conversation around this, like, obviously Dak's going nowhere this year. They're not going to trade him. The Cousins trade talk is not slowing down. Now, he has a no trade clause. And if I was Kirk Cousins, what I would do, basically under no circumstances am I waiving that trade clause. I like, where are you going to go? The Jets, they just lost another offensive lineman. Would not risk it. One, I know they don't want me back. They're going with Aaron Rodgers. So I'm kind of a mercenary. And if it starts going shitty, they will not care about me. I wouldn't touch that one. You know, I heard some buzz just driving around, listening to some sports talk shows. The Patriots, could they be interested? Doesn't really feel like Belichick. And if I'm Robert Kraft, like, well, I'm not trading any draft picks for a quarterback when we got Mac Jones. We're going to go down with the ship this year. And honestly, it's not the worst thing. We'll be in position to draft a quarterback. Now, the one team that made me think was the Atlanta Falcons. Not because I think they're that good, but because if you're Kirk Cousins and you go there, their head coach is also the offensive coordinator. So if you were to go there and impress, assuming that they would be interested, what if they wanted to resign you, right? That's a huge part. Like if you're Cousins, and Cousins has been adamant, and he talked about it on Wednesday that he's not even thinking about that. He's not wrong. Until he's asked to waive his no-trade clause, it's all a bunch of outside noise. And I also think, like, the other element, like, how many teams are really calling and really that interested? Because if you are Minnesota, I don't think you're giving them away for a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, if he does hit the open market, someone might give him 2 years, $75 million, and you will get that 3rd round comp pick. So it doesn't make sense to trade him for anything less than a 3rd round pick. But how many teams are beating down the drawer at that number? It's why it makes these two players. I mean, honestly, they're of my lifetime. Usually the most polarizing players are not like Peyton Manning, right? Or Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. I mean, we talk about those guys a lot, but their resume speaks for itself. Like, honestly, the most polarizing players of the previous generation were like Tony Romo, Jay Cutler. And that's kind of where these two guys fall. And like those guys, once you make a lot of money and you're not really some like elite guy, everyone questions, is it all worth it? And I think it's a fair statement on both sides, because you could always push back, like, how are you going to do better than Tony Romo or Jay Cutler? And most times it's very difficult to. But also, if you have Jay Cutler and you're paying premium money, are you at a disadvantage relative to the rest of the league? It's no different than Kirk Cousins, at least the rest of the high end of the league. And it's what makes these conversations so difficult. And difficult's the wrong word, but such a roller coaster. You hear so many different opinions. I personally like Cousins more than Dak, but neither guy would I feel great about having for $40+ million on my team. We're back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping us in on the NFL action with great offers every single game day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw 5 down on any of this week's epic matchups to walk away an instant winner. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. Football's more fun when you're in on the action. So download the app now and sign up with the code JOHN, J-O-H-N. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official betting partner of the NFL. With code JOHN, J-O-H-N. The crown is yours. One story that is just never going to die as long as this season goes, especially the way it's going, is the Patriots and Belichick. And there is not anyone that follows the NFL that you couldn't bring up Bill Belichick and the Patriots and should they fire him, how that should go, and they wouldn't have an opinion. He's easily one of the most famous guys in the league, rightfully so, 6 Lombardis. He went to 3 other ones. He's just an all-time football guy. But this week, he happens to be playing Josh McDaniels. And it's weird, right? Because I don't think the Raiders are that good. I think they're like got 3 players worth a damn, and those players are so goddamn good that they can win them a game. I mean, a couple weeks ago, Devontae Adams had like 17 catches. It feels like every single snap, Max Crosby is in the backfield. But they're not good. And now you got Josh and Jimmy Garoppolo going back to New England. And you look at it and you go, well, if you're Mark Davis and the Raiders, you go, well, we got to win this game. We win this game. We're 3-3 and we're back in position. Our heads above water and we're okay. But if you're the Patriots, you go, we can beat the Raiders, right? We definitely can beat Josh McDaniels is going to come beat us. Josh McDaniels is going to compete Bill Belichick. I don't care how shitty the team is. So every single one of these losses with Bill is going to grow and grow in controversy of, and you've seen a lot of these headlines, if it was any other coach, he'd be on the hot seat. It's true. He's not any other coach. So it's like, I'm sorry. He gets a little different leeway, right? He's not treated like everyone else. He's made his owners hundreds of millions of dollars. Most coaches do not. Most failed coaches lose their coach or owner's money, essentially. So when you look at the situation, you got to ask yourself, how ugly is it going to get? Because I saw a headline today that made me laugh. And it was, from a local Patriot reporter that said Robert Kraft is growing frustrated and angry with Belichick. Like, yeah, no shit. So is every other fan. Like, that's not insight right now. If you're going to report on this, you got to give me some insight of, Robert is having second thoughts if this season, if they miss the playoffs, which they will, Bill will not be the coach in 2024. That's news. Saying that Robert Kraft is not happy with what's going on, like, file that under no shit. Like, that's not a report. That's common sense, right? So until I see a report of some way Robert Kraft is feeling with Bill Belichick, I think we're all just going to assume he's not happy. This is not going well, and he is wondering how he should handle the situation. And let's face it, Bill Belichick, if he's fired at the end of the season, to me is not tapping out. He's too close to the record. Now, I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast. It turns out Andy Reid isn't that far away. And because it looks like his runway with Patrick Mahomes, that if Bill only wins, let's say 15 to 18 more games in his coaching career, Andy could pass him if he keeps on coaching with Mahomes. But that's a secondary conversation. The main conversation right now is Bill is going to try to pass Don Shula. And listen, I'm born and raised in California. California ain't Bill Belichick. Not at all. I had a buddy of mine who works in football, who's worked in the NFL in college, who told me a long time ago, back when USC was kind of sniffing around for some big dogs, under no circumstances would Nick Saban ever take that job. He hates the West Coast. He belongs in the South. Look at the two programs he's coached most recently, LSU and Alabama. And a lot of that is culturally, he's from West Virginia, but also there's a cheating element to those schools. There's just a willingness when it comes to football. It fits his personality. And when you think about Bill Belichick, think about the teams that he worked for. The New York Giants in the 80s, right? Then he went to the Jets with Parcells. And then he's been with New England. The Chargers, could you see Bill Belichick in Manhattan Beach hanging around Dean Spanos? No fucking chance. One, they would never be interested in paying him. And two, I don't think Bill would be that interested. So to me, you got to think of cities and cultures around the program or the organization that kind of fits his personality. Angry, edgy, dark. It's why, honestly, Washington makes some sense. If they fire Ron Rivera at the end of the year, new owner who maybe gives Bill Belichick, here's 4 years, $80 million. Come just try to resurrect my franchise. Just get me to the playoffs a couple times. Now, I've said forever, it's very, very weird. The owner of the Sixers could not have owned the Giants or the Cowboys. It would never have been allowed. He could not have pulled it off. He could not own the Sixers and own one of those two teams. Honestly, it's flirting with weirdness, and I would imagine many people in Philly think it is kind of weird, but luckily Washington has been so irrelevant, it hasn't gotten that weird yet. But there's going to come a time where week 18, right, the 17th game of the season, it's Commanders, Eagles for a playoff spot in 2025. Eagles fans aren't going to be cool if they win that game, the owner presenting the coach and the quarterback with a game ball. That shit's not going to fly. But if I'm him, I'm very interested in Bill Belichick. Hell, I might even trade for him. It'd be a big splash. It would kind of resurrect the interest in my fan base. I actually think they are the most likely team to be interested and go all in on Bill. I had a couple people DM me, what about the Chicago Bears? I actually think the city in Chicago makes more sense for Bill than LA, but a lot like Dean Spanos and the Chargers, they're kind of cheap. They're not exactly hiring $15, $20 million coaches. And you can be like, well, Bill's resume, his stock's at an all-time low. His worst is worse. And someone would be willing to pay him $15 to $18 million for sure. It's probably Josh Harris. So when you look at a team, the most likely destination for him, when/if, it's probably more likely when than if he's fired, would be Washington. So my guess is this thing continues to go bad. You lose to a Raider team with a below-average Jimmy Garoppolo, a Josh McDaniels, who even Raider fans will tell you, not very good. Feels like they're a two-man band. Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, a little bit of Jacobs, but he hasn't quite been the same guy as last year. That loss is going to be bad. Not as bad as last week, Derek Carr and Dennis Allen, but not good either. I bet a lot of people listening or watching have been in an accident. I bet a lot of people have been into an intense car accident. And let's face it, not knowing who to call for help is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy because Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm with over 100 offices nationwide with more than 800 lawyers. They've recovered over $15 billion for over 300,000 clients. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is so easy. That's the key. Not having representation is hard. Fighting with Morgan & Morgan is easy. If you've ever been injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/John or dial pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. That's forthepeople.com/JOHN or pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. This is a paid advertisement. As a backup quarterback, a lot of stuff is out of your control, right? Like if I'm drafted in the 4th round and I make the team at wide receiver, at defensive line, at safety, ultimately I'm going to end up playing. Injuries, defensive line, you rotate in. At wide receiver, I get 6-7 plays. Even if I'm the 4th or 5th guy, I probably play special teams. I get game reps on Sunday. As the backup quarterback, if my starter never gets injured and never plays poorly, I never take a snap. And as someone who used to evaluate all these guys throughout the year, when it came to evaluating backup quarterbacks, like let's pick the Chiefs. Blaine Gabbert, right? If Mahomes never gets injured and he takes every single regular season snap, if I want to put a grade on Blaine Gabbert, the only snaps I have to go off of if I'm an opposing team, because if he's going to be a free agent, is preseason. And that is the majority of quarterbacks, right? You look around the league. Brock Purdy, if he never gets injured, the only tape I'm going to have to go off if Sam Darnold will be preseason tape. And you look all around the league, Drew Lock, whoever. I know some of these guys have played sparingly with a rolled ankle or whatever, but for the most part, they may have 17 regular season passes. So the majority of your grade is going to come in the regular season. That's not true for these other positions. Hell, even the young punt returner for the Jets, like if he doesn't play that much on offense, I still can evaluate him preseason tape on offense, and I know that he returns, and I get to watch all of his punt returns. Right? With a backup quarterback, you get nothing. So as that position, you need things out of your control, either injury or poor play, to go your way. And then you're given an opportunity. And then you have the opportunity to make yourself a lot of money. And I was thinking about it because the news came out today. Anthony Richardson is out for the foreseeable future. They put him on injury reserve. Could be 4 weeks, but then they asked Shane Steichen, and he's like, we'll see. Like, ask, if he'll be ready to come back in 4 weeks. You don't know. And there's a chance a guy like Gardner Minshew, who the last couple of years hasn't played that much, right? Hell, he was the backup for the Eagles last year with Jalen Hurts. Like, I guess he got to a couple starts because Jalen's shoulder got injured. But ultimately, a guy like Gardner Minshew can make a ton of money. And you can look up, if he has a stretch of 7-8 games where he plays winning football, he may never be a starter, right? Some team might be willing to give him like $12 million to be a bridge starter. But he basically ensures himself being a lock backup till he's 35, 36 years old. And all of a sudden you meet him, Gardner Minshew when he's 44 years old at a dinner, and he goes, I played 14 years in the NFL. And these opportunities open up at the weirdest times, right? Took Anthony Richardson having a shoulder sprain. Think of what happened for Joshua Dobbs, who looks like a lock backup for life. Then all of a sudden, Colt McCoy gets cut. They trade for him. He gets to be named the starter. And then you watch him, you're like, he's not terrible. Now, is he an ideal starting quarterback? Probably not. But if I'm any team with a good quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, would I not pay that guy $4 or $5 million? Because my goal is to win. So if my quarterback's out a month, I know I can win 2 out of the 4 games, 3 out of the 4 games with that guy. So these players, look at Brock Purdy last year. Not in a million years when the season started, even though he made the team, did anyone around the 49ers, anyone in the NFL, think the guy was going to throw passes, let alone start games. All of a sudden, a broken ankle, a broken foot, he became the starter. A year and a half later, he's like a star. So when your opportunity comes at quarterback, and you never know when it's going to come, at all these other positions, you're constantly mixing in, you're constantly getting reps. At worst case, if you're dressing on game day, you're playing special teams. A backup quarterback, you may never break a sweat. And guys like Gardner Minshew, Joshua Dobbs get their opportunity. And honestly, you watch Minshew last week, you watch Joshua Dobbs throughout the season, I'm pretty impressed. I look at it and I go, that guy at worst is the best backup quarterback in the NFL. And ideally, you don't want that guy. You don't want him to be your starting quarterback. But when you're in that position, you basically, as long as you're healthy, you have a job for a long, long time. So those guys are great examples of when opportunity comes knocking, you can bust through that door and change your career forever and definitely change your bank account. The Steelers. I saw a clip yesterday, and I'm sure many saw this. It was the Penguins game. It might have been, I'm not a huge hockey guy, the opening night of the NHL. Could have been the last preseason game. Sorry, hockey guy, not super locked in. But they were chanting Fire Canada. And before we dive into the specifics of just the Steelers' issues on offense, an underrated part about the popularity of the sport of football, like in baseball, unless you're a position coach, like your hitting coach is Mark McGwire or Jason Giambi or some famous guy, you have no clue, unless you're a diehard hardball guy, who your assistant coaches are. You know your manager and your players. And maybe if an assistant coach has been there a long time, you get to know them. But you don't know them like you do your offensive and defensive coordinator in the NFL. In basketball, you have no clue who your assistant coaches are unless they're former head coaches. And I think one thing that has really separated the NFL is head coaches in sports my entire life have always been big parts of the reality television show that is just baseball, basketball, or football, right? The manager, the coaches in baseball, basketball in the NFL. But one thing that has really exploded in the NFL, and maybe it's always been like this, but it feels like more now than ever, and especially the last 4 or 5 years, they're more famous, are the coordinators. So it's one thing to yell at your head coach for the decisions he's making. It's another thing to know the intimate details of your coordinators, their background, and why they suck. And Matt Canada is not alone. There are multiple Matt Canadas in the NFL and in college football that fan base can't stand. Can you imagine at any other, at like a hockey arena throughout the country, anyone chanting fire the pitching coach for the Yankees? Like that would never happen. But in football, the coordinators are so powerful and they become so famous. And they become, when you're the coordinator of the offense and your head coach is Mike Tomlin, you're not really blaming Mike Tomlin. He has nothing to do with the offense. And here's the other thing I would say. A lot of people in the media, in a weird way, don't like fans. You know, they view themselves as above the fans. And I have always hated that. Like, and one thing we try to do on this show is represent the fan, just represent the normal guy. I haven't sat in a media room in a long, long time because I think fans, especially of places that are successful, like a Steeler fan, when they're yelling at, and listen, I'm not saying that some fans can't have crazy talk. I mean, I saw with the 49ers, people wanted Trey Lance to start and Brock Purdy to get benched in August of this year. So people can say crazy things, but that's part of being fan, right? Short for fanatic. But for the most part, I think universal fan bases understand what it's supposed to look like. Like if you're a Packer fan right now and you're 50 years old, like you know what good football looks like. You know what good quarterback play looks like. You know what good offense looks like. Yeah, actually, I got a pretty good idea, even though your defense hasn't been great for a while, what good defensive football is. So if you're pissed at your team, like you kind of have a right. Like you kind of get it. Like if you're a Bama fan, you go, God, something looks off. You kind of know what you're looking at. And one thing, if you're a Steeler fan and you're my age, it's like, well, I lived through Todd Haley, who, listen, we can nitpick him all we want, but his offenses were pretty explosive. And before that, we had Bruce Arians. Last I checked, the owners got mad that he didn't run the ball enough, but we were fucking pretty explosive. So what Matt Canada's doing ain't working. Pretty generic. And ultimately, we can nitpick the play calls all you want. This is a production-based business. It's very black and white. You either score points or you don't. You either win or you lose. And when you're the offensive coordinator, your offense is explosive and it's putting touchdowns on the board, or it's not. And if you watch the Steelers, it simply is not doing that. Now, I will defend him. And part of it is if the owner or the head coach is mandating that you play a certain player, then that's not on you. And only people inside the building know, right? So if they're mandating that you play Najee Harris, that's not on Matt Canada. I'm not saying they are, but I wouldn't play that guy because if it is, you have the power and the juice to play who you want to play. Stop playing that guy. He's not good enough, especially given your situation. Who is? Pickens. Get him the ball. Now you get Deontay Johnson back off injury. We'll see if he comes back this week, within the next couple of weeks. Like, you have really explosive playmakers. Now, your quarterback is limited, but I'm saying the same thing about Jordan Love the other night. Get him on the move. Stop asking him to play like Peyton Manning. Stop asking him to play like Tom Brady. He is very athletic. Get him on the move. Turn the field into half and give him 2 reads, and if not, run and get out of bounds or slide, right? So you can simplify stuff and actually improve. But the fans are not happy, and I don't blame them because their talent, and we've talked about this before, they're lucky it's good enough that at any moment their defense can score multiple touchdowns. That ain't normal. That's kind of what's happening in Dallas when they've been blowing people out. It's like their defense and special team are scoring points. It's not like their quarterback's throwing 4 touchdowns a game. So I love that the fans are this into it. I love that the fans know this much. I have a lot of respect for big fan bases of the right teams. Because one thing to be a Cowboy fan, like, this is our year to win the Super Bowl. Like, no, you're not. It's another thing to be a Steeler fan and be like, what the fuck's going on with our offense? This is embarrassing. And I think a lot of the times, and I'll get into this in a minute with Lincoln Riley, and I understand it because I'm like this, right? When your girlfriend, when your wife, when your parents tell you something, it's easy to get defensive, right? Even when you know they're right, like, bullshit, that's not right. Stop saying that and get defensive. And I think when you see some of these head coaches defend a coordinator, and listen, they're friends with him. They like the guy. They know how hard the guy's working out. I was texting with a buddy the other night. I don't think the average fan, this guy works in the NFL, can even fathom how many hours these coaches work. I mean, I don't think they're there at the butt crack of dawn, 5:30 a.m., and most of them aren't leaving until close to midnight. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and some hit or miss Thursday. But that is 3 straight weeks, and that includes traveling on the weekends, obviously play on Sunday. These are long-ass days game planning and preparing early in the week. It's crazy. And it's one thing if you're Belichick with Brady and you're winning. It's one thing when you're Andy Reid, and these guys put in insane hours. But when you're winning, Belichick now is like, what are you spending all this time? Like, you could sleep in the office, Bill. Mac's not going to throw any more touchdowns. Andy does it because he's winning. Like, it's all he knows, but he goes, it's worth it. Like, it's equating to Super Bowl berths, AFC championships, Super Bowl rings. That's what Bill would always say. Well, shit, we're going to Super Bowl every other year, and we're winning 75% of them. I can't imagine being like Joe Judge or Pat Shurmur, just like all night long grinding in the office to get your fucking ass kicked on Sunday. Shoot me right now. Like, bro, go home in 6. It ain't going to change anything, and you're going to get fired. So I bet Tomlin sees Matt Canada putting in these crazy long hours, and the same thing happens over and over and over on Sunday. It would drive me nuts. It's one thing, like, I bet Sean Payton's putting in crazy hours, but I think he'd justify it like, it's my first year, I'm setting the tone, even though it ain't equating to anything, but that's just the way these guys are wired. My ultimate point is, I don't care what industry you work in, football coaches, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying a lot of it even makes sense, but the hours they work, it's why you hear so many players go, I would never be a coach. That's crazy. Some of them end up doing it because they miss football, and then they just get back in the mix and they lose touch with how they once said they would never do it. But the hours are crazy. And Matt Canada, I'm sure, works long hours. It's not equating to anything. And the only time that they really score is when TJ Watt, Highsmith, or Minkah Fitzpatrick makes a play, or Kenny Pickett just throws a bomb to George Pickens. So I think the Steelers have major issues. You might be a pro when it comes to what you do, but we can't all be pros at everything. Take home repairs, remodeling, and renovations. That's not something you want to trust to anyone but a skilled professional. Angie's List is now Angie. Connect with a local pro, tackle jobs big and small, inside and out. Decks, leaky faucets, maybe redoing a kitchen. I know I can relate. It's not easy, and you want people you can trust. The Angie app offers robust tools so you can research and connect with local pros who come highly rated and recommended by people right in your neighborhood, all with a few taps of a button. Download the free Angie mobile app today or visit Angie.com. That's ANGI.com. Couple college thoughts. One of the greatest all-time lines I heard, Oklahoma put out a video. Remember a couple weeks ago, Oregon put out the video after they beat Colorado, and it went pretty viral, and it was cool. I think Oklahoma put out an even better video of them beating Texas, of just integrating all the, pregame hype, the week hype to the game hype. And one of their star team captain linebacker gave a line that said, "At Oklahoma, we fear God, and at Texas, they fear Oklahoma." And I saw the kid on with Pat McAfee. He said he kind of made it up on the spot. Just a great line. It is fantastic. Highly recommend going to Oklahoma football social media channels, watching that 8-minute video. It's really good if you're a football nerd. But speaking of Oklahoma, I saw Lincoln Riley. He got asked the other day about his defensive coordinator, and like the Tomlin with Matt Canada, he got very defensive. And he basically crushed the media for saying, you guys have been waiting for our defense to play bad to blame, Alex, the defensive coordinator, Grinch. It's like, no, Lincoln, we just watched your defense, and he's terrible. Like, he's not. Your defense is getting worse. You and Caleb are good. You can score a lot of points. No one's ever argued that. Caleb will go, you'll land another quarterback, and you'll keep scoring points. But you were brought here for $120 million, and they bought your mansion in Oklahoma that no one in Norman, Oklahoma would have purchased. And they asked you, what was the price? And you said $4 million. And they said, we'll pay $500,000 over that for you to compete and ultimately win national championships at USC. Fight on. That's the goal. They want Pete Carroll again, but in 2023. And they viewed you as that guy. And one thing Pete always valued was everything. He cared about linebackers just like he cared about running backs. He cared about right guards just like he cared about cornerbacks. He cared about the entire team. And I think when I watched Lincoln Riley, and listen, I've heard some things through scouts and people that have been through there, Lincoln is obsessed with the quarterback and the offense, which most offensive coaches are. Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay. The difference, even Sean Payton, in those guys, they care deeply about defense, and they will allocate resources on the defensive side of the football. And if they don't have a great idea for who to land, they will use their GM or their personnel people to help them. I don't think Lincoln really cares. I truly do not believe that. And when USC in their heyday was kicking everyone's ass in the country, they were a complete team. And the only way to win and compete to win national championships in 2023, just like it was in 2004, you have to be good on both sides of the ball. I don't care if you could score points. You have to be able to stop people. And I don't think Lincoln truly believes that. The other thing is, I think he's too good of friends with his defensive coordinator because he likes the guy a lot. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is in the business of football, when you are such good friends with the coordinator and you're the head coach, and that guy is on the opposite side of the ball that you are, and it's not working, you got major problems because ultimately you're going to have to fire the guy. And for Lincoln to act like it's no big deal, to me is a little concerning because Lincoln, listen, I want USC to be good. I want you to be good. But when I watch you say that, and most importantly, I watch your team and you get shredded on a weekly basis, it's one thing to play Oregon or Washington and give up 40 points. Arizona with their backup quarterback, a guy, honestly, I'd never even heard of, Fafita, fucking lighting you up like he's Peyton Manning, Jed Fish smoking you on Saturday night at home. You're not being paid $120 million for that. It's like Brian Kelly. You're not allowed to lose to Ole Miss. You're not allowed to lose to Ole Miss. He ended up beating Missouri, but at one point in time in that game, it looked like he was going to lose to Missouri. You're not allowed to lose that game. You're not allowed to. You're allowed to lose to Alabama. Just like if you're USC, you're allowed to lose to Oregon. You can't play this closely to Arizona. It's not okay. Not at that price point. not for that much money. And the money is a huge factor in all this shit. And speaking of money, Mark Stoops, Bob's brother, made a comment that basically after he got his ass kicked by Georgia, that they bought a lot of good players. And of course, everyone came out of the woodwork to have crazy takes. And I've said it forever before NIL. I thought a lot of the media, especially for like the Jay Billises of the world, were very disingenuous when they talked about players being paid, especially in basketball. Like college basketball has always paid players under the table, straight cash homie, for my entire life and well before I was born. Hell, John Wooden's team were doing it in the 60s and 70s, let alone Mark Stoops' school, Kentucky, has the biggest payroll in the country well before NIL. And one thing I've been told through the grapevine is there's this thing called dark money. Because now that NIL, if I give a kid $150,000, he's getting taxed on that money. And if he plays at USC, if he plays at Penn State, he is paying federal and state income tax. So if I give you 150 grand, you're going to pay $65,000, $70,000 in taxes, right? But this thing called dark money goes, hey, listen, school X is offering you, 200 grand. How about this? We'll give you a $100,000 NIL deal, and we'll give you $70,000 under the table. So you won't have to pay a dime in taxes. So you get taxed on the 100, and then I'll give you another 70 grand just in, not necessarily in brown bags, but that way. And that's going on at all the big institutions. It's why all these coaches are so pissed off, because they're like, listen, it's not even just straight NIL money. It's NIL money mixed with this dark money. A bunch of shady shit's happening. It's pretty clear. It's not hard to figure out who's doing the shadiest shit. Just look at the top programs. And I've said forever, I have no problem with any of it. Pay to play is a huge part of most industries. Welcome to the real world. But this notion now that everything's above board and all the media are like getting in some big circle jerk, like great for the players, it is still like, it's just very bizarre. A lot have like political undertones, right? It's weird, but it is not by any means fixed. And most of the top programs aren't just paying, like, listen, if you're Shedeur Sanders or Caleb Williams or Drake May or whatever, and making millions of dollars above board, who cares about the taxes? You're making so much money. But if I'm getting 100 grand, like, I'm actually not getting $100,000, right? And before, those type players would have got cash that was untaxed on top of a car. And then everyone was pushing for this, which is good for the high, like top 1 or 2%. But the majority of guys that also would have been paid, they actually might have got more money and had less headaches. So this situation right now, and listen, Georgia's always going to have better players than Kentucky, is not just like the most seamless operation that everyone acts when these coaches complain. They're complaining about stuff that technically they're not going to come out and say, just because they're just not. That's just a fact. Just like they never did back in the day when everyone was getting money under the table. But from what I've been told, and I know all these people that go into these schools, crazy shit is going on right now. And it's not just in 1099 payments. I promise you that.
Can I tell you about my friends at Factor? With the busy fall season just around the corner, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals or jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up with fast, chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Let's face it, a lot of us moving fast, going places, and don't have time to eat healthy. And that's a key. A lot of us are trying to improve our diets. That's where Factors come in. Choose from 34 weekly flavored packed dietitian-approved meals ready to eat in less than 2 minutes. Level up with the Gourmet Plus options prepared to perfection by chefs ready to eat in record time. If you're looking for calorie-conscious options ahead of the busy season, try delicious, dietitian-approved calorie-smart meals with around or less than 550 calories per serving. How do you beat that? So head to factormeals.com/John50 and use the code JOHN50 to get 50% off. That's code John50 at factormeals.com/John50 to get 50% off.